Good morning, Royal We Fellowship. Shabbat Shalom, and happy Saturday morning to you. I'm excited that you are here with me, and we're going to get started right away. We're going to jump in and we're going to learn about adapting to narcissism and how sometimes we fall into the trap of becoming too adaptive. Adaptive is really one of the biggest issues that we have. I struggled with being overly adapting myself. And so it's a fascinating story that we're going to see in the life of Jacob and Jacob's family, and we're going to get into that today. For those of you who are new to Royal We Fellowship, welcome, Shabbat Shalom. If you are new to this channel, you are welcome to support Royal We Fellowship through links on the banner of the homepage or down in the description box. It's not required, but if you feel inspired to do so. And also, this channel is a side channel from the Organic Royal We channel. And we are looking in depth at the ancient literature of the Bible, and we're applying our understanding of narcissism and this world of toxicity that we live in. We're applying this into our understanding of the Bible. Good morning, everybody. And hopefully you're all having a great morning. Let's go ahead and open up in prayer and get started. Our Father, who art in heaven, how holy is your name. Your kingdom will come and your will shall be done, here on this earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from the evil of this world. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. And everybody says, amen. All right, so when we left off last week, we saw that Jacob had returned back to where he initially escaped from his brother Esau. He ran and he went and he worked for Laban, just to catch a lot of people up here. Worked for Laban, became wealthy, earned his daughters, married Laban's daughters, became a family, and became blessed, and then left Laban. And we saw a lot of narcissistic interactions there. Laban chased him down and basically said, I own you, and I own the women with you, and I own the children with you, and it's all mine. And we saw narcissism displayed, the whole it's all mine mentality, which is how narcissists typically operate in this world. They look at this world as everything belongs to them. And this is what makes it so difficult getting out of these situations, because once you're in an adaptive place with them, which we're going to talk more about adapting in this message, but once you're in an adaptive place with narcissists, they feel like they own you, and it becomes very dangerous and hostile and volatile and difficult to get out of the situation. And so we see that Jacob was able to get away from Laban. Okay, they separated. Jacob made his way back to his brother Esau, where they were able to have a cordial meeting. Now, 20 years had been in between Jacob leaving Esau. The reason Jacob left was because Esau went into a narcissistic fit of rage and threatened to kill Jacob. So Jacob was fearful to go back. It would be as though you left toxic members of your family who threatened you, and then 20 years later, you were thinking of going back, right? And it wasn't an easy thing for Jacob to do. There was a lot of fear there. And another interesting aspect of this is that oftentimes when a narcissist instills fear inside of you, even when you grow, even when you're bigger, even when you're wealthier, it doesn't necessarily take that fear away. Now, there's no doubt that Jacob could have been able to handle himself with his brother Esau, his older brother, but when they were younger, Jacob couldn't. Jacob was probably smaller. The stories indicate that Esau was the one who was out hunting and gathering. Esau was the man's man. Jacob was the mama's boy. And so between the two of them, at the time, it's safe to say Jacob was fearful of his older brother. He was bigger and stronger. After a period of 20 years, how many of you are aware that no longer matters? They're not little kids anymore. Jacob is probably a big burly man himself. After all, he worked hard for 20 years out in the sun. He had great physical strength, okay? However, because of the trauma in their younger years of that, he still had this fear inside. And this is something that you and I need to pay attention to with narcissistic abuse in our lives. As we grow and become stronger, it may not completely eradicate that fear from the trauma that happened a long time ago. Even though we're big enough to handle ourselves, there's still that fear. Why? Because it was implanted. That seed was implanted. So aside from that, as we move on, what we're going to see now is that Jacob had made his way back. He had a peaceful, if you will, reuniting with his brother Esau. Okay. And this goes with the video that I put out on the Organic Royal channel about reuniting and breaking no contact. I know that this video came out. A lot of people were like, you'd never break no contact and this and that. And obviously, when you leave a narcissist, you never break no contact. But in this case, it was 20 years. All right. And there was a lot of ways in which it was done. And I tried to get that out in the message that I put on the Organic Rowie channel. So after a period of 20 years, Jacob broke no contact with Esau. He did so with a lot of fear, but it ended up being okay. Now, watch this, though. Jacob did not become best friends with his brother Esau. He did not even become brothers. He reunited, and once again, they went their separate ways. And Esau was no longer in the story at this point. So basically what it was is they came together. Hi, how you doing? You're okay? I'm okay. Here, take this as gifts. No, I don't need your stuff. I got my stuff. Okay, cool. You're not going to try and kill me anymore? No, I'm not going to try and kill you anymore. It's okay. All right, great. All right. People have this wrong idea of reuniting and breaking no contact as though it means you have to have some kind of a, enmeshment again. You have to be best friends. You have to be family and spend every week together. And that's not at all what breaking no contact is. Breaking no contact is just the ability to face the person, say, hey, how you doing? Good? All right. Yeah, good, okay. And then go your separate ways again. And this is what happened. Jacob went a separate way, and he ended up in a place with his camp, with all of his people. And last week, what happened, what we talked about, was they settled in this land where there were Hivites. There's also Canaanites, and there's a bunch of other people in the land. One of his daughters last week wandered out to mingle with the women of the local area. In the process, she was met by one of the Hivite young men who seduced her, charmed her, and raped her. All right. As a result of that, Jacob's young sons found out about it, and they planned, because these Hivite people were adamant, we want to marry your daughters, and you can marry ours, and we'll all be one big happy gathering in Hivite land. And Jacob knew, and his brothers knew, they were not to have anything to do with the Hivite people or the Canaanite, none of this stuff. The cultures were not, it wasn't jiving. And so the sons set something up. They said, sure, go circumcise all your men. And then if you're circumcised, we'll go with your little plan there. The Hivites went back and encouraged all the men to be circumcised. And we see the narcissism in this because he said, look, this is why we're doing it. We are going to have these new people become Hivites with us. Jacob and all of his stuff. And this means that their stuff will be our stuff. That's the mindset of narcissism. It's like a corporate merger, right? But anyways, what really happened is as they circumcised themselves, they were in a lot of pain, obviously, for weeks. Jacob's two sons went and managed to kill all the males in that area out of anger, out of the fact that their sister was raped. And then they told Jacob, we did this because you were about to turn our sister into a prostitute, basically trading her to join in with this stuff. And so it was they did what they felt they needed to do in this area of this whole big mess of narcissism. And so this is where we're at today. All right. We are in chapter 35 now today, and we're following those exact events. And now, obviously, trouble is brewing. So word spread. Jacob's sons, and they killed a lot of these Hivite men. All right. And we're going to see a little bit more of the context of what was really happening and why Jacob and his sons and even his daughter were in a situation to where this all took place. Now, how many of you are aware that when you're in narcissistic abuse, nobody is innocent? I know we like to think that we're innocent and we don't do anything wrong, but the reality is we are in these situations with people. And again, the Royal We motto is narcissistic abuse is a result of being with people you have no business being with, doing things you have no business doing, going places you have no business going, right? Granted, this is not the case if you are born into a toxic family. So I'm leaving that out. I'm talking about as adults, when we enter into relationships, even going back to toxic family. Listen, when you're an adult, you no longer have to go back to a toxic family. You become your own family, right? There's nothing that says you have to go back. When you're a child, you have no choice. Unless, it gets so bad that people take you out of the situation or you leave the situation for one reason. So, but what we're seeing here is this whole story in the last chapter, right? The rape, the two sons going and killing all the Hivite men is a result of being in a place and getting too comfortable. And we're going to see that here. Chapter 35, open up with me after this long intro, right? Chapter 35 starts off, it says that then God said to Jacob, again, this is right after his sons killed all the Hivite dudes, guys. Chapter 35 says, then God said to Jacob, go up to Bethel and settle there and build an altar there to God who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau. All right, so notice that God is saying, go back to Bethel where you fled from your brother Esau. What he's really saying is it's time to flee again. It's time to flee. Jacob, because of what's taking place here, you have got to run again. This is what God is saying, right? So Jacob, and this is why he had to flee. Verse 2, so Jacob said to his household and to all that were with him, get rid of your foreign gods you have with you, and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Verse 3, then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone. What a lot of people are missing here is he's saying, we are in distress again, and we need to go. Why are we in distress? Well, because we're in this place. One of my daughters was raped. My two sons now killed these Hivite guys. We are in distress. This is a result of being in narcissism, surrounding yourselves in toxicity. Now watch this. I'm going to get deeper into this with you. So, verse 4, so they gave Jacob all the foreign gods they had and the rings in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak of Shechem. Then they set out, and the terror of God fell upon the towns all around them so that no one pursued them. All right, so let's look deeper into this, shall we? So it's obvious that all of Jacob's camp, all of the people with Jacob, his sons, his daughters, they all did something that we tend to do in this world wherever we go. And it's how we get stuck in narcissism. They adapted to the lifestyle and the ways of the local people living in the land. So, who was in the land? Well, we know the Hivites were. The Hivites were the ones who, one of the guys raped his daughter, and his two sons went out and killed a lot of the Hivite men in the city. We also know that at the end of the last chapter, chapter 34, if we go to the end of it, the very verse 30 of chapter 34 says this, Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, those were the two sons that killed the Hivite people. This is what he said. He said, you brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and the Perizzites. So there were not only Hivites in the land, but there were also Canaanites, and there were also Perizzites, people living in the surrounding areas in the cities around them. Now, what's the problem with living amongst these different types of people? Well, nothing if you are keeping to yourself, minding your own, staying authentic to who you are, your values, your morals, and your beliefs. But watch this. What did Jacob have to say to his household? Back to the chapter we're on today, chapter 35, verse 2. Jacob said to his household and everybody with him, get rid of your foreign gods you have with you. Purify yourself and change your clothes. Then come and let us go to Bethel. Did you catch that? When they arrived there, they were one. They were under the authenticity of the God they believe in, their value systems, their morals, and their beliefs. They were solid when they arrived. Now, we don't have an amount of time. It doesn't tell us exactly how many years Jacob and his camp and all of his people, his family, and were there. We don't know this, but what we do know that at some point between when they arrived and this point right now, they started to attach themselves to foreign gods. They started to attach themselves to different clothing styles. They started to adapt to who? The Hivites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites. Yes, Jacob's people, his clan, started adapting. They lost their authenticity, started adapting to the surrounding people. This is something that lands us in narcissistic abuse every time. Now, we often talk about narcissists and how they mirror and how they steal people's identities and this and that, right? They morph into different people. But how many of you are aware that if we're not careful to a certain extent, we all do this? You know, how many of you are aware if you move to LA, given a certain amount of years, you're going to, and I'm talking about LA, California, certain amount of years, you're probably going to start dressing and walking like someone in LA. You move to Nevada, Las Vegas. After a period of time, you're probably going to start walking and moving like somebody in Las Vegas. Listen, I'm 4 years into the Midwest myself, in St. Louis, Missouri, coming out of California. I would have to admit that my style has somewhat changed. My mannerisms are changing. There's a natural bit of adaptation that takes place. Where you go, you're going to adapt. Otherwise, how are you even going to mingle, or how are you even going to have any relationships? So there's a natural gravitation towards adapting somewhat. But adapting gets really bad when it starts to get to this point of what we see in verse 2, where it says, Jacob says, get rid of the foreign gods you have with you. Oftentimes when we're not careful, when we go and we start hanging out with people in new places, over a period of time, we forfeit and we get rid of our authenticity and even our values and even our morals, and we start adapting to other people's values and morals. Now, I'm here to admit that one of the biggest problems that I ran into with my in-laws back when I was in California was that I forfeited my morals and values, and initially I started to gravitate because I thought that's what you had to do in a family, and I started to adapt to their lifestyle. But I did not belong in their lifestyle. I didn't belong in that. The narcissistic abuse and all the heavy hostility came as a result of that. Had I been 100% authentic and true to values and morals from the very get-go and kept that and walked away from a lot of the stuff that they were doing in their lifestyles, who knows, maybe I would not have had the narcissistic abuse. Now, some of you might be resonating with this right now. How many of you would say that it's to some level you lost some of your own authenticity? Back when you look back at the narcissistic relationship you were in, you lost some of the authenticity that you had with you, your morals, your integrity, your values. You traded it in. You took up some of the ways of the narcissistic people. You adapted. And as a result, we don't belong there. So moving on in this chapter, this is where we see what we see taking place as Jacob was telling his camp, get rid of all the stuff that you picked up. Get rid of all the foreign gods. Change your clothes. Stop dressing like them. Stop acting like them. It's time to move on. We've got to get out of here. God is saying to get out now. We have to get back to our authenticity. We have to get back to our faith, our roots. It's time to leave. And so this is what they do. They separated themselves now from the narcissism of the world. And this is for protection, because when you adapt to the world around you, when you adapt to others around you, a lot of times you're neck deep in narcissism and you don't even realize it. Again, narcissistic abuse is often spending too much time with people you have no business being with, places you have no business going, doing things you have no business doing. And so everything must be purified. And this is what happens when we go no contact. We get out, we're purifying ourselves. And it's a painful process, because when you leave narcissism, when you leave that, you have to shed and get rid of all the stuff that you started to adapt. Shed that stuff. You've got to get rid of that stuff and purify yourselves. And so in verse 6, we see here, Jacob and the people with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. There he built an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, because it was there that God revealed himself to when he was fleeing from his brother Esau. Oftentimes, God will take us, if we are back in another narcissistic abusive relationship, God will sometimes draw us out back to the place he initially brought us to when we first got out of an abusive relationship. Now, when I was younger and I was processing the narcissistic abuse that I saw from, my stepfather at the time, and it was really painful experience. He brought me into a place of isolation where I was frustrated and confused and was crying out to him. And what's interesting is when I then experienced it from other in-laws, that same abusive stuff, God brought me right back to that same place of isolation where I was frustrated and crying out to him. What we're seeing here is that God will bring you to the same place in order to purify you, in order to get you to shed the things that you have adapted to in your life. In order to purify you, he will bring you back to that place of isolation. He'll bring you back to that place where he can meet you once again. And a lot of times this place is a place of frustration and isolation, because once again, you're being purified. So make no mistake about it. When you come out of narcissistic abuse or any toxic relationship, you have to go through a purification process. You shed all the things that you adapted to. A lot of times in these narcissistic abusive relationships, you pick up these habits and these things, and you started to idolize different things and this and that. And all of that has to be purified, has to be dumped. And then we're going to get into verse 8. Now, Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak outside Bethel. So it was named Alan Bakuth. Verse 9. After Jacob returned to Paddan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. And verse 10 says, God said to him, your name is Jacob, or was Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name is Israel. So he named him Israel. All right. And now, verse 11, and God said to him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. The land I give to Abraham and Isaac, I also give to you, and I will give this land to your descendants after you. Then God went up from him in that place where he had talked with him. So when God meets you in this place where you're purifying, he will make promises to you. And again, God is trying to remind us, listen, we have no part in the outside world of narcissism. This is what he's reminding Jacob. He's saying, Jacob, listen, let's stay focused here. You've got too comfortable. And again, we don't know how long Jacob was in the land near the Hivites and the Canaanites. But what we do know is they all got comfortable and neck deep in the narcissism. They adapted to the false gods. They adapted to the clothing style. They adapted to all of that outside stuff. And what happened as a result? Hell broke loose. So the message here from God to Jacob, and it's the same message to me and to you, is we've got to be careful when we find ourselves in a new location and we start to get too comfortable and we think that we can start to just fit in with the other people of the area. And before we know it, we are comfortable, we have changed, and we have adapted, and we start dressing a little bit differently. We start walking and talking a little bit differently. And a lot of people will say, but you have to in order to meet friends or this and that. But be careful, watch out, because this is what paves the way into being with people you have no business being with, doing things you have no business doing, going places you have no business going. In the case here, they forgot even who their God is. They forgot their authenticity. They had foreign gods. And some of you might be saying, wow, does it happen that simple? Yeah, it does. How many of you are aware? We're not there yet, but we're going to see later when Moses takes the mixed multitude of people out of Egypt, just in the amount of years, which was 40 years, by the way, a long time, but just in the amount of years they were traveling, a lot of people in that group forgot who their faith was in. They started developing different false gods and golden calves and all this stuff. It is easy to do. As humanity, we have to be aware of our own, what's the right word here? Our own susceptibility to being led astray, to developing false idols, to developing, even subconsciously, not even aware of it. Like I said, you move to a new place, and over time you start adapting. This can lead to danger. We have to do a diligent job, even if it means to break away in isolation on our own, because we've decided to, in order to meet back with God, to find our authenticity, remember who we are, and go through a process of purification and start to weed out situations and people and things, even if they haven't done anything wrong yet. But based on the discernment that we have, understand, okay, that relationship, that could go bad, okay, and start to weed stuff out. Listen, I want to thank you for being. I'm going to wrap this message up right there. I think that's a great place for us to stop. And once again, thank you. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for being here with me. If you would like to support Royal We Fellowship, do so. You can find links down below or on the banner of the channel. Your support is helpful. It's inspired, not required. And have a blessed weekend. Have a blessed week, everybody. And we'll be back here next Saturday morning for Royal We Fellowship. And watch out on the organic channel this week for a lot of new videos covering some things that we're picking up from Royal We Fellowship here. Have a great weekend, everybody. Blessings to you all.